Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at GCNlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor at USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set, cocked, locked? Here we go. Your dial is set correctly to USA Prepares. Thank you for being in class with us today. Jason, thank you for engineering the broadcast at Genesis Communications Network, the powerhouse in communications. Guineith Isaacs is with us live in Australia. Welcome, Guineith.
Hello, Vincent. How are you this morning?
Very well, and you?
I'm good, thank you. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So, Guineith, what would you like to talk about today? I know we were going to talk about, we're going to talk about some comic books and people in the media. I just, as a point of information, class, I have never been able to get interested in comic books, no matter what. When I was a child, I saw them. But the people who were in my circle of friends, or I was in their circle of friends, didn't read comic books. We were interested in real things, and so to this day, I cannot force myself to read a comic book. I don't and didn't read comics in the newspaper. I just wasn't interested. What I was interested in is reality, science, history, and something called, I would call future history, which would be science fiction. Other than that, I really wasn't too much interested in other things. Guineith, your thoughts?
Yeah, I've read comics from time to time. Okay, they can have a good educational function. For instance, there's some children, like, for instance, my husband Archie could never learn how to read from any lessons that the teachers gave him. Because if you could imagine the movie called The Wall by Pink Floyd, that pretty well sums up the educational system that was what Archie had to deal with in Glasgow, and he didn't learn anything. By the time he was in his early teens, he was spending very little time at school. He was spending most of his time, as he said, on the corner, which meant on the corner hanging out making trouble or looking for trouble. He was not a well-behaved child. But when he was about 15, he began buying Superman comics, because all the kids were buying them. They were American comics that only just become available. And he learned how to read out of Superman comics because, that it was something that was new, it was different, and it was exciting, and all the other kids were reading them, and so that's how he learned how to read. But the comics that we're going to be talking about today are pure propaganda. I mean, you could have said the same about Superman as well, admittedly. But these are really an even more, these are propaganda that would have made Joseph Goebbels proud. These are a series of comic books that have been produced by a particular publishing company in America. The name of it just escapes me at the moment. But they're extolling what wonderful, virtuous people, the likes of Kamala Harris, Alejandro Ocasio-Cortez, and Jill Biden and all of these sorts of people about what wonderful, wonderful human beings they are and what an inspiration they should be for all the little boys and girls out there. Now, I've got a problem with that because I know so much of the history about so many of these people. Would you like to start with Jill Biden, Vincent?
Sure, let's start with her.
Yeah, okay. Now, I don't actually know much of her background, but I would like to know something about her courtship with Joe Biden. I would like to know how old she and Joe were when they met. Like, was she 13 or 14 years old, for instance? And did Joe first court her by asking if he could sniff her hair? Or if she could sit on his lap, or if he could, touch her on the head or on the hips or somewhere else. Because this seems to be Joe's preferred method of getting to know the females around him, which is really not appropriate. I would like to know how he first got to know Jill Biden and how old Jill Biden was when he first met her, And I think according to this comic book that she was a little bit older than 13 or 14 years old, but these people lie so much, you can't really tell, can you? Does that make sense, Vincent?
Yeah, they lie all the time. Absolutely. It does make sense.
Yeah. And another thing that's in this comic book, actually it's not in the comic book, but this is something else that I found out about Jill Biden, is she's got a very good friend. And this very good friend is a female, supposed to be female soccer star. And this female soccer star, her surname is something like Rappioni. I can't quite remember her first name, but I'll call it an it. Its surname is Rappioni, and the reason why I say it claims to be female, and yet when you're looking at a photo of this creature celebrating, it looks like that the photo is out there on the internet, she's just been celebrating a goal that she's obviously scored in the event of playing soccer. She's got a square jawline, and she's got square pectoral muscles, and she's leaping up in the air, and really it's pretty hard to tell if she's a boy or if she's a girl, and she says, yes, we should all have transgender sports. And you're looking at her and you're saying, really? So you are deliberately going to take up a career as a female footballer, given that female footballers are paid something like a tenth that male footballers are paid, and yet you are going to drive your whole industry into the ground by allowing men to pretend that they are women so that they can take over this sport of women's soccer when women are paid something like 10%. Professional female soccer players are paid something like 10% of what professional male soccer players are paid, just because the games are less interesting to watch. That's the simple truth of it. And because, for whatever reason, I think Paul Joseph Watson did a very, very interesting video in about the last week on this very topic of female soccer players. And it's just not interesting to watch. There doesn't seem to be any skill there. But this creature Rappioni, claims to be female, has significant masculine biological markers, and I can't tell if this is a male, a biological male, or a biological female. It's just, or a hermaphrodite, which is the other possibility, a biological hermaphrodite, But it's got blue hair or purple hair, and I've got an aversion to anyone these days who dyes their hair pink or blue or purple. I've never met a person who dyes their hair an unnatural colour who's actually a good person. It just doesn't happen, from what I've seen. So if somebody comes up and she's got her hair dyed pink or purple or blue or, psychedelic orange or something like that, I immediately deeply distrust that person. This is just a reality of life. And this Rappioni has dyed her hair at various stages, bleached it white, and then dyed it purple and various other colours from what I've seen. And Jill Biden recently, in the last week, had a podcast with this Rappioni soccer player and said what a wonderful, wonderful person that she is. I think it was for something like International Women's Day or something, some silly thing like that. And, Jill Biden dyed a section of her hair bright blue. I wonder if they're going to include that in this series of comic books, because it seems like Jill Biden is really, really, really friendly with this soccer player that says that she's female and says that she's a lesbian, which means that she wants to have relationships with other women. Oh, and incidentally, I've got something to point out. I think I've pointed it out before, and that is that biological women who claim that they are lesbians are having a really big problem, because so many of the women supposed to be that are coming out on the the queer scene, LGBTQIXYZ or whatever, so many of them that are claiming to be female these days are not biological females. And all the lesbians who want to get with other women are really hacked off with these transgender people pretending to be females, men pretending to be women, because they're feeling cheated. They want an actual woman, not a man pretending to be a woman. So it's gradually descending into a state of utter confusion.
Yeah, we'll be right back with Guineith Isaacs live in Australia. Guineith, I've got a couple comments about a few of the things that you've said. During the days of the Wild West, and I live in an area that's probably as close to the Wild West as you can get here in Missouri, in rural Missouri. During the days of the Wild West, I'm talking about the late 1800s, if someone were playing cards at a saloon and they were playing poker at the poker table, and a person cheated, that person just might get shot with a pistol, a revolver. And a man pretending to be, well, because of cheating, okay? If you cheated at poker, someone might pull a gun on you and shoot you to death. Well, a man pretending to be a woman at sports, to me, is a cheater. Is a person who is cheating with an unfair advantage. And in most instances. So Why is it that society allows that kind of cheating? Meaning, pretending to be something that you're not. Okay. I have another comment. You mentioned blue hair and pink hair. So, when I was a teacher back in the 1990s, in day number 1, in order to be in my class, to sit and learn from me, I had some rules. And I codified those rules in a contract form. And in order to be in my class, I told the superintendent that I will teach these young children, juniors and seniors, if they would sign a contract with me about behavior. Things that I would do, things that they would do, responsibilities that they would adhere to. And the contract would be signed by 3 people. Number 1, the student. Number 2, the student's parent or parents. And number 3, by me. And the contract delineated what I would do. I would teach them to the best of my ability. And they, in turn, would do certain things in order to be in the class. And any violation of any of them would result in the removal from my class. And one of those things was that they would represent themselves in class and outside of class in a professional manner. So if they did something outside of class that was bad behavior, they'd be removed from my class. If they did something inside the class that was bad behavior, they'd be removed from class. Additionally, they agreed in contract form with their parents that they would not dye their hair any unnatural color. If they were blonde and they wanted to be a brunette, that was fine. If they're a brunette and they wanted to be blonde, that was fine. If they wanted to be a redhead, a natural type of redhead color, that was fine too. But no red, no pink, no blue, no green, no yellow. Okay? I'm talking about RIT dye, or Jello dye, because that was popular, using Jello, red Jello, as a hair dye. And if they did, they'd be removed from my class. Now, why did I do that? Because my class was manufacturing computers. And I felt, unilaterally, that if a customer were to come in and spend $500, $1,000, back in the 90s, that's what computers cost, and they bought a printer and software, etc., that someone with blue hair or pink hair would diminish the presentation to that customer of our products and services. I felt that someone who did not look and act the part of a computer professional was unacceptable. And you know what? Not one parent challenged me. Not one student challenged me. I also required that my students wear a uniform. I bought the shirts, Mrs. Finelli and I bought these shirts, and everybody got a monogrammed shirt with the name of the class on it. And it was called Virginia Data Technologies, with our logo. And it was plum colored, and you had to wear your shirt in class. You also had to wear the rest of the uniform, which was a belt, and the belt matched the shoes, and the slacks were khaki-colored slacks. Everybody wore khaki. Everybody wore the plum-colored shirt that we supplied, and everybody wore a belt. And no one had pink or blue hair. And it worked. And my students said, Mr. Finelli, we feel professional. And a couple other comments. So tomorrow, Kyle and I will be discussing small gasoline engines, for rototillers, lawnmowers, etc. We'll be discussing wheels, tires, wheel balance, mistakes in wheel balance. We'll be talking about spark plugs and your calls. So if you've got some questions about preparedness, feel free to call us tomorrow. And the number is 866-582-9933, 866-582-9933. And that number works today as well with Guineith. My students in high school would say to me, and they would volunteer this. I didn't ask them. They'd come up to me and they'd say, Mr. Finelli, you know, we feel better. We feel professional when we come to your class because we dress up for your class. We wear, you know, the khakis and the uniform, and we feel better, and we do better. We actually perform better because we are dressed professionally. And that's what they would tell me. And one other comment I'd like to make, and that is, in my class, we were manufacturing computers. And it was quite a big operation. It's something that's never been done before, and it's never been done since, to my knowledge. And we sold, out of my classroom, $1,200,000 worth of computers. We started up, in 1 year. In 1 year, $1,200,000. We were on the 6 o'clock news, the 11 o'clock news, radio news. We were all over the media. Not because we had media specialists, because they figured out what we were doing. It was unusual. Even a U.S. congressman decided he was going to come and see for himself. His name was L.F. Payne, and he was from the Charlottesville area. He decided to come to my class and see what we were up to. And so I decided that we would have a choice. And I offered the students a choice whether they could have it, whether they wanted a dictatorship, I would be in charge, or whether we'd have a pure democracy, and they would run the show. And I let them vote. That was like day one. And they decided they wanted democracy. And I said, okay, if you want to do that, that's fine with me. But since you're going to run the show, you're going to have some people in charge of various areas of this manufacturing business. Because literally, we were manufacturing computers and selling them to real customers out of our classroom. And I said, so we're going to need a vice president of manufacturing. We're going to need a vice president of customer service. We're going to need a vice president of accounting, vice president of inventory, and a vice president of software installation, etc. We needed a bunch of vice presidents. And I said, so instead of me picking, because you all wanted a pure democracy, you're going to have to figure out who's in charge of what. So here's what I'll do. I will meet with the superintendent, and I will see if I can get us leave where we can go off to the back room of a restaurant for a day. And you can prepare and figure on a week. So in about a week, you'll have a week to prepare on which office you would like to have. And I delineated the offices. And you can run for office. Now, what you'll have to do is convince your classmates, the members of this manufacturing operation, our class, why you should be in charge of that particular area of the organization. And we'll do that. And we'll vote. And whoever gets the most votes gets that job. It doesn't pay anything because it's illegal to pay students to come to school. Okay? No one gets paid. So we did that, and I said, we'll be going to the restaurant. And you know how they dressed? They, on their own, they decided that they would wear their Sunday best. They decided. No shorts, no pink hair, no provocative anything, no T-shirts. Everyone the girls wore dresses, their Sunday dresses, their best. And the boys wore their Sunday suits, their best. And they made their cases for why they should be, vice president of inventory, manufacturing, accounting, customer service, etc. And it worked. And I explained to them before we had any voting, before any presentations, and each one got on the equivalent of a little stage and presented, in this back room of the restaurant. There were over 60 of us. We had 60 students to begin with, so it was a pretty big class. And I explained to them that by holding that office, they were responsible for all the activities within that office. And if it went well, they get all the credit. If it went bad, they got all the blame. And their fellow students will beat them up. Not literally, but would push them and prod them and make sure they didn't make a mistake. Because if they did, the whole organization would suffer. Okay? We had a quality control vice president. If quality failed, the company would look lousy. Everybody would look lousy. And that particular class was held in the highest esteem of all the activities and classes in the entire high school. Actually, in the entire county. Actually, in the entire state. Because that particular class was selected to represent for 13 days at the state fair the Virginia's Department of Education's, what would you call it, presence. We were given the keys to the state fair for 13 days, where my students would represent the Department of Education in their uniforms. So, yes, it can be done, but no, it can't be done with pink and blue hair. Guineith?
Yeah, I would absolutely agree. You know, oh my gosh, getting back to the comic books, Jill Biden's comic book was not the only comic book. Kamala Harris also got a comic book as well. Should we discuss Kamala Harris for a little bit?
Sure.
Yeah. People probably, people who are a bit younger than us, they probably just think of Kamala Harris as being the vice president, you know, creepy Uncle Joe's right-hand woman. But they might not realize that this woman's got a little bit of a history. Oh, my gosh. Back in the day, meaning back in the 1990s, when Bill Clinton was the president of the United States, Kamala Harris, she had a different job back in the day. She was the secretary for the Department of Justice. And she thought that she did a really, really good job because she put out this rule, and this rule was called the 3 strikes rule. And that meant that if somebody was arrested 3 separate times for 3 separate crimes, that they would get locked in a prison on a life sentence. Now, those 3 separate crimes on 3 separate, you know, offences could all occur at the same time. If the blue team really decided that they didn't like you, then they could find 3 things that you had done wrong, or they could harass you and persecute you and perhaps goad you into responding 3 separate times, even if it was on the same day or on different days. It didn't matter. And you would be locked up for the rest of your life. There are people who are still warming jail cells in 2020 because they were sentenced to life imprisonment under this 3 strikes rule by Kamala Harris's Federal Department of Justice back in the 1990s, and some of them are warming jail cells for the crime of having a joint in their pocket. But it was literally that awful. This is who is now the Vice President of the United States. Oh, yeah. And back in the day, there was a fellow by the name of Michael Charles Rupert. And Michael Charles Rupert, back in, I think it was about 2014, was found with a gunshot wound to the head. And he's dead. It was a fatal gunshot wound to the head. And it's still being disputed. Did he commit suicide or was he murdered? Because for a great section of his adult life, the CIA and the FBI certainly wanted him dead. And then one day he was dead with a gunshot wound to the head, and people are still arguing all these years later, was he murdered or did he kill himself? And I think, I don't know the answer to that question, to be perfectly honest. I think that it is perfectly conceivable that he was murdered, you know, but I don't know. I don't have enough information there. And information regarding Michael Rupert's death is rather hard to come by. Anyway, back in 1996, Michael Rupert stood up before David Deutsch and with Kamala Harris on the podium of the Department of Justice in a town hall meeting in California. And Michael Rupert got up in this town hall meeting and basically said, I am a retired narcotics detective with the LAPD. I know for many, many years that the CIA has been running drugs into the United States from Mexico and exporting ghost guns from Mexico, from the US to Mexico, and distributing them all over the world. Nothing that I'm saying here is any, you know, any news that anyone of our age does not know, because that was the Iran-Contra scandal. If anyone wants to know about this, all that they need to do is go on the internet and type in Iran-Contra, and they'll learn all about it. And some of those ghost guns that were exported from the US to Mexico found their way to Iran. And who was, you know, Michael Rupert stood up in this town hall meeting, and David Deutsch said to him, "Well, hand us your information. We'll investigate it." It was never properly investigated. No heads in the no people in the CIA lost their jobs over this. No CIA agent heads figuratively rolled. You know.
All right, we'll be right back. We'll be right back with Guineith. Guineith, do you have any thoughts about the Vice President Kamala Harris's ancestors regarding the slave trade prior to the first American Civil War?
Yeah. You know, Kamala Harris, the reason why that she has the surname of Harris is that she's actually descended from Robert Harris, who was the coffee plantation owner. Big businessman back in the day, owned a large section of the Caribbean coffee trade. And he was a slave owner. And he had a bed warmer who was one of his African-American female slaves. And that was Kamala Harris's female ancestor. And, you know, history can't be helped. You can't help who your ancestors were. And my ancestors were more than likely slave owners as well, because my ancestor was the governor of Jamaica. My ancestor was Alexander Lindsay, who was the governor of Jamaica. So he was almost certainly a slave owner. The difference is that Kamala Harris has not repented of her slave history, in that when she did this three strikes policy, she set up a massive slave population, mostly of black men, some black women, but mostly of black men working on slave wages of a few dollars a week, making products in U.S. prisons that then had the Made in America label attached to them, and basically just about destroyed all of the free manufacturing industry in the United States and replaced it with prison labor, prison slave labor. And these people literally could not escape. And they were paid something like $5 or $10 a week for working for, 40 hours a week, doing whatever they did within the prison labor system. Now, that is absolutely disgusting, in a word. And I want to know, are the producers of these comic books going to outline any of this Kamala Harris history that's all on the public record? That was all scandalous back in the day. I remember when this was on the evening news. All of this happened back in 1996, 1997, 1998, when Billy Boy was the president in the White House. William Jefferson Clinton was POTUS, and Kamala Harris was his Justice Secretary. And oh my gosh, the whole thing of Michael C. Rupert, she was standing on the podium with the U.S. seal on the podium with Department of Justice written around it, with Michael Rupert saying, "We know the CIA, I know that the CIA is smuggling drugs through LA from Mexico and then sending guns back the other way, ghost guns from the U.S. back the other way. No serial numbers, no nothing. What are you going to do about it?" And Kamala Harris is there on the podium and the whole thing gets swept under the carpet. Are they going to put that in the comic book? I don't think so, but they should, because it's true and it happened. The film of that, expose is still out there on the internet. It's not going away. It's a famous piece of U.S. history. It's not going anywhere, and even if they got rid of it off of YouTube, it's on half a dozen other video sites that are out there now that the U.S. government has absolutely zero control over. This woman is pure evil, and they make them out to be such heroes, and it sickens me to think there's somebody. These people, they must have had 30 or 40 people working together to put this comic book together, to lie and deceive to the children of the United States about the nature of this woman, Kamala Harris. She's an evil slave master. She has betrayed her own race. What more can I say? And they make her out to be such a hero and somebody that should be looked up to and admired, and nothing could be further from the truth.
Yeah, and they do the same thing. They do the same thing with Bill Gates, right? You can look up to Bill Gates. Not me. We'll be right back. Gwyneth, remember when we were talking about Bitcoin? It was about $750. Today, right this moment, $58,589.
Yep, that's right. Unfortunately, I'm not really into Bitcoin at the moment because I've found that it's been more necessary to put my money into growing trees, fruit trees, and putting a garden in, establishing a chicken flock, establishing a rabbitry, and all of this sort of thing. And that is where my funds are at the moment. And the reason why I chose not to continue with the Bitcoin thing was that I could see that eventually it would end up with a mark of the beast system, and that the Bitcoin would probably end up being tied up with people's personal microchips. I think that is what is coming down the track. And as soon as I saw that, I said to myself, right, well, probably, Bitcoin is going to continue to go up. Okay? And I would say within a very short time that you're going to see six-figure Bitcoin prices. Okay? Because you're beginning to see some really big players come into the Bitcoin market now. It's, it really is absolutely remarkable what is happening. But eventually it is going to be tied in with the Mark of the Beast technology. So at that stage, if you are a Christian, if you are disinclined to take the Mark of the Beast, then you can have all the Bitcoin in the world and you will not be able to access it. I believe that the Bitcoin technology, after the return of the Lord Jesus Christ, which is prophesied, which is going to happen, all of these terrible events are actually the precursors, according to Bible prophecy, to the return of Jesus Christ. He is coming back. And I believe that Bitcoin will continue to be there after Jesus comes back, and that it will continue to operate as a form of currency after Jesus comes back. But in the interim, if you've got any Bitcoin tied up in any computing system, I believe that you will be required to get the Mark of the Beast in order to access it. And as a believer, as a servant of the living God, I can't do that. So instead, I'm putting my money into establishing my farm with fruit trees, vegetable gardens, and small livestock. Does that make sense, Vincent?
Oh, sure. And we're putting our resources into tangible things, spare parts. And this is nothing new, class. We've been recommending this for many, many years. And it's interesting. It's interesting how the global players, the big players, make money. When you talk about the Kamala Harris's family, how they were involved in the slave trade before, at least reportedly. And you can look it up. Just go to the internet and look up Kamala Harris or Kamala Harris slaves. You'll find it. If you look at how wealthy people have made money, they found oil and they pump it out of the ground, or they make money where other people can't, and they make it on, slaves. How about this? How about slavery? Stealing people and then selling them. Or how about this? How about economically entrapping people into slavery, where you get them to pay and pay and pay? That'd be like the Federal Reserve System, right? Where they siphon off every transaction. If you save money, they siphon from it. If you spend money, they siphon from it. No matter what you do, they make money on it. And so you can make a little bit of money off everybody. And that's what a lot of these guys do. That's what the oil companies did. The big oil companies. Oil was virtually free. All you had to do is pump it out of the ground and refine it and sell it. Yeah, there's some work involved. But it's, that's how the very wealthy make money. Bill Gates, he made money selling defective software. And once you used his software, you'd find that it had some problems, and he'd fix it for you with a new version. And you'd buy the new version, and that would fix some of the problems. But it would have new problems. So you'd have to get a new fix and spend another $89 to buy the next upgrade or version of Windows or Word or Microsoft Works or whatever it was. Defective software with, and I'd be embarrassed. If I manufactured software and it had bugs in it, I'd be embarrassed. I'd want to fix it for free, and I'd say, I'm so sorry. No, but not these guys. They charge you for their mistakes. And that's the way it works. And the GDP just goes along with it, saying, well, that's the way it is. Just the way it is, and we'll just keep paying and buying, and that's what they do. And they let Apple get away with modifying the operating environment or the operating system that causes the battery to wear down, and the battery cost is so expensive to replace a battery that people say, well, oh, geez, I guess I need a new phone. Well, that's what they did with computers. Bill Gates would come out with a new version of Windows. The computer would slow down because of the bloated Windows, and people would say, geez, I guess they need an upgrade. And at least they would upgrade the computer. At most, they would buy a new computer. That's the way it works. And you want to compound this, you'll look at cash for clunkers. During a previous administration, not the Trump administration before that, cash for clunkers. You take a vehicle and the government would pay you to pay the dealer to destroy the engine. So you could have a vehicle that might have been banged up, but had a good transmission, differential, running gear, engine, and they would pour this silicate substance down the intake and lock up the engine. So they take a perfectly good engine and destroy it, and they call that cash for clunkers. Cash for clunkers. And so what happened? A whole bunch of really good used engines were destroyed. And in favor of what? These tiny little roller skate cars that people are driving now. Yep. That's what they did. That'd be during a previous administration. Have you heard of cash for clunkers?
Yeah, I have. I think that was an atrocious thing because a lot of those old cars were really good cars. You know, they might have been 20 or 30 years old, but they got people from A to B, and it all worked. And he did it just to create an economic stimulus. Oh, yeah, that's the other comic book character, Michael Obama. Michael Obama gets a comic book as well. Should we discuss Michael Obama?
Sure. Yeah. Barry, Michael, and the Rented Children. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah. Michael Obama. There's a Hollywood socialite by the name of Joan Rivers, and she was, well, for a while there, she would have, parties in her Hollywood mansion, and she was, a reasonably old lady. I think she was in her 70s or 80s, but she's one of these old school Hollywood socialites that you get, and she would have big fancy champagne Hollywood parties in her big mansion, and she'd have several hundred of her very best friends over. And she would have Barry and Michael as honoured guests until they began doing something. I don't really know what they did, but in the end, she ended up booting them out of her Hollywood party. And they were not invited to any more of her parties after that. And she went on the news media at a particular point, and and Barry had just been elected to the presidency, and they said, oh, how long do you think it will be until we get the first gay president, the first homosexual president? And she says, oh, you've got him now. And the reporter said, oh, what do you mean? And then she said, oh, Michelle's a tranny. And they said, what do you mean Michelle's a tranny? And she said, well, Michelle is a transvestite. She's not a biological female or something like that. And boy, oh boy, did that make enemies between Joan Rivers and Barry and Michael. And about 2 or 3 weeks after these events, after Joan Rivers had this meeting with these reporters, she had to go in to have some throat surgery. And the throat surgery was a failure, and she died on the operating table. And when I, going back to, in my past life as the pirate surgeon George Wilson, that was a joke that I used to say, throat surgery, mate. That meant giving somebody some surgical procedures to the jugular, meaning cutting their throat. That's I believe that's what happened to Joan Rivers on the operating table. I believe that she was murdered. And I'm just wondering, are they going to write that little historical factoid? I've got no proof of that, by the way. All that I know is that, according to the history books, 2 or 3 weeks after Joan Rivers made that public press statement, that she died on the operating table during a throat operation. Are they going to write that into the comic book about what a hero Michael Obama is? Are they going to write it into the comic book about the day that he, forgot to strap up his gear properly and was photographed walking along with something swinging around? I hate to be crude. I don't want to be, but this happened. This is evidence that Michelle is not female. She's not a she. Michael Obama is a male, and on the inside, everybody knows it. And even Barack Obama, from time to time, has been caught on a hot mic calling his beloved Michael. That's just how it is. Does that make sense, Vincent?
I've heard all that, and I've read all that in the media. So, class, if you think back, Joe Biden was vice president from 2009 through 2017. So he was vice president during the cash for clunkers era. I just wanted to make sure that this is kind of clear. The cash for clunkers was a concept. It was a complete failure that was designed to spur Americans to spend money they didn't have on something they didn't need nor want, which would be a new car. And there was criteria for trading in a clunker, as they called it. Let me define what a clunker is by the official terminology. So the eligibility criteria for your vehicle to be a clunker, to get an unusually high trade-in value, was the vehicle must be less than 25 years old on the trade-in date. Less than 25 years old. It had to have a weighted combined average fuel economy of 18 miles per gallon or less. Trade-in vehicles must be registered and insured continuously for the year preceding the trade-in. The trade-in must be in drivable condition. So what they're saying is this clunker had to run. It had to work. And it had to be registered. Does that sound like a clunker? Or does that sound like a useful vehicle? It sounds like a useful vehicle to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. And class, let me define it this way. The least expensive vehicle you can own, in terms of cost to own it, drive it, use it, etc., is the one you're driving right now. It's not the new one. The new one's going to cost more. Insurance is higher. Repairs are going to be more expensive, etc. It's going to be more flimsy. It's going to fail more frequently, and the repairs for it are going to cost more. So the least expensive vehicle, almost all the time, to operate is the one you're driving. And that's the one they would call a clunker back during the Obama-Biden administration. So just remember that this complete fiasco, this failure, was during Jumpin' Joe's vice presidency. And today, Jumpin' Joe and the gang are going to unveil the taxing increases that y'all are going to benefit from. They claim that they need to modernize the roads. I don't think our roads really need modernizing. I think they need repairs. I don't think we need to have sensors to monitor every vehicle's movement. I don't think that's necessary, but that's what, that's 5G. That's where we're headed. So it looks to me like, again, the wealthy are going to benefit from the new tax increase that will be unveiled, at least in part, today. And I'll bet you, well, I know for a fact, that what the government can give you, the government can take away. But the government also, when they give it to you, they've taken it from something. And that would be from you. They take it from you, they siphon off the administrative part, and then they give you some of it. Now, believe it or not, I used to run, oh boy, how do I say this? I used to run the computing aisle for a government. I was in charge of computer technology for a government. Called a government operation. And this government operation would receive funding. And it would cost about 50% of the funding that the government got to give the other 50% to the people. What I'm saying is the overhead was 50%. Can you imagine that? And that's the absolute truth. So when you see these government workers and they're disgruntled and they just hate their jobs, it costs about 50% for them to sit there and hate their jobs and to not pay attention to you. No kidding. That's the truth. Guineith?
That's absolutely remarkable. If they don't spend their government budget, they don't get it next time. That's just
and the military has a term for that. And when they fly their jets toward the end of the oil burner runs, that means wasting fuel, because if they don't, they won't get it next year. We'll be right back. Just a second, getting back to the cash for clunkers. The Barry Soetoro Obama Biden administration. So, according to Wikipedia, to ensure that vehicles traded in under the cash for clunkers will not be resold by dealers, the program outlines a procedure for destructively disabling the engine, and thus also precluding the possibility that any mechanical engine components might be salvaged or used by repair or of any other vehicle. The motor oil is drained out of the vehicle and replaced with a sodium silicate solution, and the engine is started and run until the solution, becoming glass-like when heated, causes the engine's internal bearings to abrade and ultimately seize. So what they've done with this ridiculous program is intentionally destroy engines that worked. Destroy them. And I know it was a problem because I had a former friend who needed an engine for a truck. And I went to find one, and there weren't any. Because Barry, Joe, and the bandits destroyed them with this ridiculous Cash for Clunkers program, which provided a minimum of $3,500 trade-in value for a vehicle that should not have gotten that kind of a $3,500 to $4,500. Now, here's an interesting thing. So, in order to have your vehicle be eligible, it had to get greater than 22 miles per gallon. The new one. The old one had to get less than 18 miles per gallon. Now, the delta between 18 and 22 is 4 miles per gallon. So they were willing to destroy vehicles that ran to get 4 or more miles per gallon fuel economy improvement. But there were ineligible vehicles. Now, here's some of the ineligible vehicles. A Ford Aerostar van, a Lincoln Continental. Now, Lincoln Continentals, 1987, didn't get very good miles per gallon, but they were ineligible. Why? I don't know. How about the 1987 Grand Marquis station wagon? That was ineligible. Why? The 1987 Lincoln Town Car, the 1987 Ford LTD Crown Victoria wagon. Why? Those got crappy mileage or lousy mileage. Why? Why were they ineligible? How about the Dodge, some of the Dodge pickup trucks? The 1992 Jeep Comanche four-wheel drive. That got lousy mileage. Why? Why were they ineligible? This is what your government does. We actually overpay morons and buffoons to tell us what to do. I hate it. I absolutely hate being told by people who know less than I do what I'm supposed to do. I hate that. Guineith?
Yeah, I hate it too. You know, something that a lot of those vehicles have in common, the ones that are not eligible, is that they are former government vehicles. The Dodge Charger used to be a very common police vehicle, blue team vehicle. The Lincoln Continental used to be a very common high-end, limousine, chauffeured type vehicle for government officials. And I'll bet that one or two former or present government workers who used to have to do with these vehicles still have some of them hanging around in the back of their shed. And
they want parts for them.
And that they have the parts for them, and that they want them to still be circulating out there in the public. Mm-hmm. So as soon as you said Lincoln Continental and Dodge Charger, I thought to myself, hang on, wait a minute. Dodge Charger is almost the archetype of the American police vehicle, right?
I didn't say Dodge Charger. I said Dodge trucks. But the Lincoln Continental, yes. The Ford LTD Crown Victoria, yes.
The Crown Victoria. Sorry, that was the one. The Crown Victoria.
Yeah. Right.
That was almost the archetype of the American police vehicle during the 80s and 90s.
That's correct. That's correct.
That was it. That's what they used.
Mm-hmm.
And
they loved them. And they loved them. And now they have these little race cars. Now they ride around in these souped up, high powered, very fast, poor miles per gallon, poor POOR miles per gallon little race cars. They have, it used to be that the police would have a vehicle with a bench seat, and it would be small hubcaps, and it would be stripped down. Not anymore. Now we drive stripped down vehicles, and they drive the expensive vehicles.
Yeah. So
because they can
one rule for them and another rule for us.
Right.
Just like always goes down. Mm-hmm. I think that we should just stop doing what they tell us to. I think that that's going to be and just not to make a big deal about it, but just to quietly stop complying.
Yeah.
Because, how I can see it going down with all of these new sensors that they're going to put onto the roads and all of this sort of stuff, and they're going to build all these new systems and blah, blah, blah. The thing is, the whole system is at the very point of collapse, okay? I don't think that there's even enough silver on this planet to create the solder to create all of these sensors that they want to put across every square inch of the world. Because they don't just want to do it in the US, they want to do it everywhere. And the planet's a very, very big place. There is not enough silver to do the soldering to create all of these devices on the Earth. That means that ultimately their plan is going to fail. It's going to seem to succeed for a time. My estimate would be it will seem to succeed for between 5 and 10 years. And then it will fall into a screaming heap. And you will see them, which was the other thing that we were going to talk about today. Massive civilizational and systemic collapse is coming. And people need to now move themselves away from their system in every single way that they possibly can. Okay? So that means that if if the municipality in your area tells you not to get a water tank, that means you should go out and buy a water tank. If the municipality says that you should only put your well down to 150 feet, you should just quietly tell the driller 250 feet. This is the sort of thing I'm talking about. And if the driller refuses to do it, maybe you can offer to pay him a little bit of a bonus if he will do that extra 100 feet of well depth. This is the sort of thing that I'm talking about, because these are the sorts of stupid regulations that are going in all over the world. And another thing that you'll find as all of this begins to unwind is that it will seem as if nature itself is fighting their systems. And I wrote to you earlier in an email about a dream that I had about a volcano erupting. And I dreamt in my bed at night that I'm not inclined to go to protests, by the way. It's something that I basically never ever do. Because although I think that they are necessary, I think that ultimately it's too much of a risk for me personally, and that I will be needed after the collapse happens to help rebuild, because I've got a special set of skills that can help to teach people how to construct stuff with minimal.
We've got two callers on the line. Glenn in Michigan, welcome. Arjun, you're next.
Hello?
Yes, welcome.
Oh, hi. This is Glenn from Michigan. How are you guys doing?
Very well.
You hit a hot button with me on this Cash for Clunkers, and it brings another thing to it. Back in, I think it was approximately 2008, 2009, when that program was implemented, I owned a software company that provided software to car dealerships. I had about 20 to 22 rooftops, meaning that dealerships that were my clients, and they leased software from me to manage the variable end, which is the front end of the business, the prospecting, the sales, and all that. When that program came out, I couldn't believe it. You know, I knew all the general managers, the owners of these dealerships I had for clients. They were taking perfectly good running cars, and they were giving these people rebates of, I think at that time, it's been a while, I can't remember exactly, it was like $3,800 to trade in specific vehicles. And vehicles like the Crown Vic, the Grand Marquis and stuff, they were ineligible because they were being used there were specific dealerships that remodified them for police cars and stuff. So it was just to benefit the government and benefit the dealerships, which, you know, GM was just about going bankrupt at that time. They bailed them out and stuff. So your assessments, both you and Gwen, are 100% correct. And then they would take these vehicles that were perfectly running vehicles, and they would render them ineffective. They had to pour some type of solvent in them to freeze the engine, and then they had to have them, the metal was supposed to be crushed and stuff. There were, you know, a few ingenious dealerships that figured out to avoid that, put them back on the market again. But in general, that's what happened. Your assessment's 100%.
Well, it was a crime. It was a crime against the planet, because there's no way that you can take all of the energy and all of the pollution and all of everything that goes into the manufacturing of a vehicle and then throw it away and replace it with a little, 22 mile per gallon or better vehicle and have that be a net benefit for the planet. It's impossible. The laws of physics prevent that from happening. And that's what our government does. It does stupid things like that. Well, I really appreciate your call. Yeah.
Let me really quick add one more comment.
Sure.
I don't remember the years that this transpired, but there was a time when propane grills, for barbecuing in your house, the industry was flat. They lobbied Congress that the propane tanks, I believe they had an internal thread, and the new ones have an external thread, to outlaw those internal propane tanks. And you had to purchase the new ones, and the grill business went through the moon after that. All those old tanks got repainted and went and got sold to Mexico, to South America, to Middle South America. Unbelievable.
Yeah. And we all had to buy new tanks because they wouldn't be refilled because the valving was different and the threads were different. You're absolutely right. A couple of very quick comments, class. If you want to send me an email, you can send it to instructor@usaprepares.com. instructor@usaprepares.com. If you like what we're doing, the kind of broadcasting that we're doing, please let me know. If you don't like it, you can let me know as well. And tomorrow, you can call us. Kyle and I are going to be talking about preparedness, tires, spark plugs, small engines, etc. Things that we think that you need to know about. That's tomorrow. And feel free to call us with your preparedness questions, whether it be plumbing, heating, electrical, solar, gasoline engines, cars, trucks, anything regarding preparedness. I don't want to talk about politics. So other than politics, there are plenty of people who have broadcasts about politics. So I don't really want to do that. I got a statement from a credit card company. And we use credit cards. And Capital One, it's because Menards issued their card, the big card from Menards is issued by Capital One. Well, we got the statement and the payment in full was due, or partial payment was due into 1 or 2 days. So I called them up and I said, hey, thanks for sending me this statement, but there's no way you're going to get our payment in time. So I don't feel like going to the post office today, but I'll go tomorrow and we'll write you a check tomorrow and pay the bill in full. We always pay in full. We don't incur any interest charges. And I said, I'm just letting you know that the mail was delayed or you guys mailed it late or something, but I just got it. And so they said, yeah, you pay your bills on time. So, we'll put that in the file and we send them a check and everything's good. Then a couple of days later, we get a letter from the electric company and they're going to shut off our electricity. And why? Because we didn't pay the bill. Why didn't we pay the bill? Because we didn't get the statement. We didn't get the statement. And we don't have this online banking thing, so we don't use that. So what I'm telling you is the U.S. mail is fallen to a level I can't believe. They have a monopoly, and they can't even handle that. So the mail doesn't seem to get here on time, and it makes us look bad, meaning the Finelli family. It looks like we're a bunch of deadbeats now. So Mrs. Finelli called the utility company and said, hey, we just got the disconnect notice, but we didn't get the statement. The reason we didn't pay the bill is because we didn't get it. And they looked and they said, geez, you've never been late in 15 or 16 years. You've been a real good customer. We're going to waive all the fees. And, so the bill was paid via credit card. What I'm telling you is, class, be really careful and don't allow the U.S. mail's failure to deliver to impact you. So be proactive. Call your credit card companies right away if you get your statement late. And here's what companies like Capital One want. They want your check to be in their hands about a week or more prior to it being due. So by the time they print it, mail it, you receive it, there's no way most of us can have the check 7 to 10 days in the hands of the credit card company before the final date. So be careful and be proactive. Get on the phone with them, call them up, tell them what's going on. They'll annotate your account and you won't have to pay the late fees. And if you do have a late fee, negotiate with them. Say, look, I'm a good customer of yours. Can you waive that? Would you please do that for me? Thank you so much. Guineith?
Yeah, that's, everything's, like I said, everything's falling apart. People have forgotten how to work. So that includes the postal workers. People seem to think that work involves pressing a series of buttons. And I on the Alex Jones show today, Alex said it perfectly. He said people are now being paid to keep chairs warm and press buttons and pretend they are working. And I heard that and I thought, you have hit the nail on the head, Alex. This is why I listen to his show, because I don't listen to many shows, but I listen to the Alex Jones show, and I listen to USA Prepares, and I listen to the Sons of Liberty. That's the top 3 shows on the GCN radio network. And I listen to 1 or 2 others, but I don't really listen to very many others. But that's true. People, and they've forgotten how to work. They think that work is sitting at their computer pressing buttons. And sometimes my work involves sitting at a computer pressing buttons as well, like when I'm emailing you, for instance, talking about what we're going to do on the show, or when I'm writing books. But that's not the total sum of my work. My work is also going outside and planting trees and planting bulbs, planting vegetables, getting crops in, and so on and so forth, looking after chickens, looking after rabbits, looking after horses, looking after dogs. It's all work. But you know something? It doesn't really feel like work. It's
right,
enjoyable,
because it's your hobby.
And I want to do it.
Right, because it's your hobby, and you've turned your hobby into your lifestyle. Yeah, and I feel the same way. And class, the reason I do this broadcasting is it's fun for me. I enjoy doing it. I don't get paid for doing it. And when it stops being fun, I'm going to stop doing it. Thank you so much, Guineith. Thank you, Jason. See you tomorrow.